So far, our automated browser test will register a user and then click an item on the home page. That brings us to here, the item page. The next step is to add an item to the cart, which is now simply a matter of clicking the Add to Cart button. When we do that, you'll notice that a badge appears over the cart icon here to tell us that we now have an item in the cart. So in this video, we're going to instruct Nightwatch to click the Add to Cart button and then check that the cart quantity increased. Let's first create a page object for the item page by going to the terminal and typing touch tests e2e page objects item.js. Let's now open this file and begin by declaring a module by going module.exports equals an object. Now we won't provide a URL property for this page since the item page always has a dynamic URL and can't be programmatically navigated to. So let's instead define an elements property. And we're going to create an add to cart element, which is going to represent the add to cart button. So we'll assign a selector to this, and that's going to be button name add-to-cart. While we're at it, let's also add an item element. We can use that to test if the item page has loaded. So we'll assign an object to this and add a selector property, and we're going to set this to .item for the class item. Let's go to the top of our test now and define a new variable, item, and assign to this an instance of the item page object by calling browser.page item. We're then going to replace the wait for element visible item call down here with item dot wait for element visible, and then use the item alias like that. Now at the bottom of the test, before we call end, let's now add in, we'll split that up first, and now we'll add in item.click and use the alias add to cart. At the start of the video, I showed that when we add an item to the cart, a badge appears over the cart icon in the nav bar displaying the quantity. We can now use this change in the page to assert that the add to cart action was successful. Now, so far we've been using Nightwatch API commands like click, navigate, get attribute, and so on. We can also create our own custom commands to encapsulate the logic of more complex actions. So let's now create a custom command to get the cart quantity. First, we'll go up to the terminal and we're going to create a directory for our custom commands by going make dir tests e2e custom -commands. We'll now create a file to contain the new command by going touch tests e2e custom commands, and this one will be called get cart quantity. We'll also need to tell Nightwatch the location of our custom commands, so let's add a custom _commands_ path entry to the Nightwatch config, and we'll assign to this tests e2e custom commands. So here on the screen we now have the sticky nav component file, and this is where our cart quantity badge is located. Now how our custom command will work is that we're going to get the text content of the badge element here, which is actually this span. Now to ensure that we have a precise selector for doing this, let's add an ID to the badge element. So we'll put ID and we'll make it equal cart-quantity. With that done, let's now define our new custom command, getCartQuantity. So we're going to begin by calling exports.command. And that's going to export an object with a property command from this file, and we'll assign a function to this. We'll now use the Nightwatch API method getText to get the contents of the cart item badge. So inside the function, let's put this.getText. Now the first argument is going to be the CSS selector for locating the text. So that's going to be hash cart quantity. Second argument is a callback function. This function has an argument result from which we can get the text value found in the element. So let's put that there like that. The getText method is actually an asynchronous method, so we need a solution for returning a value. Now the typical pattern for async JavaScript methods is to return a promise which resolves the value. However, this pattern is not used by the Nightwatch API, which instead uses callback functions. So to be consistent with the Nightwatch API, we're going to do the same thing here. So let's pass an argument to our method, which will be callback. And then let's call callback inside the getText method. We can then return the value by passing to the callback parseInt result.value. Using the native parseInt method will ensure we return a number rather than the string value that getText will provide. Finally, we want to return this.getText as per our Fluent API. Let's now use this new command in our test. So we're going to use the same pattern for handling the callback value that we did here for getting the link using the getAttribute method. So what we're going to do is we're going to first create an uninitialized variable quantity. Then we're going to call our custom command directly before we add an item to the cart down here. So we're going to go, after this perform method, we're going to do a get cart quantity right here. And to use the callback, let's provide an anonymous function. And it's going to have the argument result. And inside that function, we're going to initialize the value of quantity by going quantity equals result, like that. So we've now counted the cart quantity before we add an item to the cart. So at this point, we'd expect the value of quantity to be 0. So next, after we've added the item to the cart, which we do on this line, we're going to again call the custom command. So let's go ahead and put that here. And this time we can use a fat arrow function for the callback, again with result as the argument. And inside the callback, we're going to make an assertion. So let's put browser.assert, and this one is going to be the equals assertion. And what we're going to do is we're going to increment quantity here as the first argument, and as the second argument, we're going to put the result. So what that's going to do is check that the cart quantity has been incremented after we've performed the add item to cart action. So I've just tried to run the test suite and it's failed with unable to locate element cart quantity using CSS selector. So the problem that we've got is that when there are no items in the cart, the cart quantity element doesn't exist yet. So in other words, this span is not yet in the DOM due to this VF here. So we're going to have to modify our custom method to take this into account. Unfortunately, the getText method has been designed to always throw an error if the select fails, even if we don't try to access the returned value. And a try-catch won't work here either. So what we're going to need to do is first test to see if the element exists, and if it does, then we can try to get the value using the getText method. And if it doesn't, then we'll just simply return 0. So to do this, we're going to go to the top of the function, and we're going to call another Nightwatch API method, which is this.element. Now, element is a flexible method that allows us to find and return a DOM node in a variety of different ways. So as the first argument, we're going to pass a string, and this one is literally going to be CSS space selector. Now this tells the command that we're going to provide a CSS selector as the locator strategy. So there are other ways to find an element other than using a CSS selector, which is why this method requires us to specify that. Now the selector that we want to use here is the same one that we used for getText, this hash cut quantity. So rather than writing that twice, let's actually just cut that out and create a variable for that. So we'll go const selector, and then we can use that here in getText, and we can also use it as the second argument for this.element. Now the third argument to element is a callback function. So let's provide a fat arrow function here, and this one's going to have the argument res, short for result, and inside the function we're going to create an if statement, and we're going to test the condition res.status is equal to -1. This is how we can tell if the element was found or not. So if it wasn't found, then this statement will evaluate as true. And that means we can go ahead and call the callback and pass in 0. In other words, if the cart quantity element can't be found, the cart quantity is implicitly 0. So if the element is found, we can go ahead and do our getText call like before. So let's just put an else block here, and then we can simply move in this logic here. Now, the last thing we need to do is remove that return statement from there and actually put it up here like that. So I've just gone ahead and run the test suite again, and this time all the assertions pass. So with that done, our custom command logic is now complete.